You're listening to episode 164, Kelsey's Story, a daughter with gastroparesis and hereditary spherocytosis. Hello, my friends. Welcome to Child Life on Call. This podcast is a safe place for parents to share their stories about what it's like to have a child that has a medical experience, diagnosis, disease, and or everything in between. We know there's power in sharing stories, and that power multiplies when you can listen to other parents who have walked a similar path to yours. Giving and getting advice is great, but hearing how another parent navigates the complexities and nuances of healthcare is even better. As a child life specialist, my role is to support, validate, and provide emotionally safe spaces for kids and their families, and I am so honored to be on this journey with you. In addition to parent stories, we sprinkle in some expert episodes every now and again that have content for both parents and professionals in the field of healthcare, all with the mission to empower parents to be confident advocates and partners with the care team during healthcare experiences. We're so glad you're here. Hello, my friends. I'm so happy to have you here today. And I also have my co-host, Serene, with me today, who is the founder of Hello Sleuth. They are the WebMD of kids' health, and all of the information that is put in there is by the experts, meaning parents, and gone through a lot of data analytics so that when you search your child's illness, you're not just going into the abyss of Google. You can actually log on and see what's going on. So go check them out at hellosleuth.com. So today we are talking with Kelsey. Kelsey is the mom of 3, and her daughter, her youngest, was born with what they would know to be hereditary spherocytosis, and then a journey to figure out that she had gastroparesis as well. And as we talk about in the episode, gastroparesis in pediatric, especially young pediatric patients, is not well known. So she had to do a lot of understanding and advocating. And we mentioned at the end, this would be a great episode for physicians and nurses who work with this population to really listen to as well. So medical parents, child life specialist listeners, we're so glad that you're here today. And I'm so happy to have Serene and Kelsey with me today. Before we jump into the episode, I wanted to let you guys know that if you are a parent, a child life specialist, or professional working with children, you're going to want the hospital or physician's office or urgent care that you take your kids to have the Child Life On Call app. It is an evidence-based tool designed to empower children and families during medical experiences. And 100% of the child life specialists who have used this app believe that it can help with expanding child life's reach beyond the bedside. And 100% of child life specialists believe it helps parents feel more empowered in their child's care. Learn how to get the Child Life On Call app for your facility or doctor's office by going to childlifeoncall.com/partners.
Kelsey, thank you so much for coming on. Katie and I were talking about how beautiful your family is. So always just love to learn a little bit more about you and your family, and like your kind of the start of your journey of where you are now.
Yeah, so I am married to my high school sweetheart. We live in the Parsonsburg area, which is near Ocean City, Maryland. And we have 3 kiddos. Jackson's 7, Ryder is 5, and Scarlett is 2. So as you guys know, we have Scarlett, who's 2 years old. We didn't find out that she was sick until she was about 2 months old. We had found out that she had a blood disorder called hereditary spherocytosis from a targeted gene test that we did preemptively, knowing that her older brother had it. Luckily, she didn't have many symptoms from it other than just some mild anemia. She follows like a hematologist and has blood work done often. But like I said, it wasn't until she was about 2 months old that she began losing weight, throwing up constantly, was failing to thrive. Even after multiple attempts of changing things up, like we went from breastfeeding to formula feeding. We tried to fortify her formula. We tried to take dairy out of it. All of the things, and she was still unable to hold down food. And it was honestly like a downward spiral from there. But my mom gut really knew something was wrong.
Yeah, it's even just going back to Serene mentioning how gorgeous your family is. It's one of those things like you never know just from looking at the outside what's going on inside. And that's such a perfect example too of like the sacrifice that you make for your kids. Like that's not easy to cut out dairy and to fortify things. Serene, I know you know all about like the liquid and all of
And
that stuff.
calories and all that. Yeah, that's
Measuring everything. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So take us from there. And I'm like that mom gut you speak about is I don't know about you, but it's always the balance of like, am I being crazy or is this something? And trying to like listen to which side it is always hard.
Yeah, so it was hard. She went through multiple really long hospitalizations, tests, procedures before we got her official diagnosis. She went through never-ending blood work, x-rays, ultrasounds, upper GI series, even endoscopies and biopsies under anesthesia. And eventually, she had something called a gastric emptying scan, which is what gave her the official diagnosis of gastroparesis. And if you're not familiar with it, gastroparesis is a motility disorder, which causes delayed gastric emptying. So essentially, she would eat, the food would sit there, and then she would throw it back up because she couldn't digest it in a timely manner. And at that point, she was failing to thrive and was severely malnourished. And unfortunately, gastroparesis has no cure. And even despite failed medication trials, she was still very symptomatic. So at that point, she had to have a feeding tube placed. Originally, she had something called an NG tube placed, which goes through your nose and into your stomach. And then about 3 months later, she had surgery to have a G tube placed, which is where they create a stoma and the tube goes directly into her stomach. She could really only tolerate her feeds at a very slow rate. And honestly, it wasn't long until she stopped tolerating her G tube feeds altogether. She was then hospitalized again and was placed on something called PPN nutrition, which is nutrition through an IV. She was then placed under anesthesia again to have something called a GJ tube placed. So this time it would mean that the tube would completely bypass her stomach and go directly into the small intestines. At this point, that felt like a really huge step backwards, but we knew it's what she needed in order to get nourishment and to start thriving. She did really, really well with the GJ tube for a long time, and she was thriving on it. And then about 3 months ago, she became a candidate for something called pyloroplasty surgery, meaning that they would permanently open the pylorus, which is where your food needs to go through in order to digest. So, for some people, this is a surgery that can happen if you have gastroparesis, and it can be a game changer for you. Some people, the results are very minimal and there's no relief at all. Thankfully for her, the surgery was honestly a game changer. She was able to go from being completely dependent on J tube feeds to going back to a G tube. And she's even eating some by mouth now, too. And even just started feeding therapy, which is a huge win because at some points during this journey, we didn't even know if she would be able to eat at all by mouth. So this was a huge win. And then she was also diagnosed with something called hypotonia as an infant. Between being so malnourished, being in the hospital, and so many hospitalizations, surgeries, her muscle tone became very weak very fast. And she started falling behind on all of her developmental milestones, which you guys know if you're watching all these other kids in the same age group hit all these milestones, learning how to crawl and walk, and watching your kiddo take all these developmental steps backwards, it's hard.
Oh,
Yeah, so she started physical therapy twice a week. She was fitted for SMO ankle bracelets, and then she even got a gait trainer, which, if you're not familiar with that, it's a mobility device, kind of similar to like a walker to help her get around until she was strong enough to walk on her own. But she's still in PT twice a week, but she's getting stronger every day. So it's been a journey to get where we are today.
I feel like you've covered every discipline in the hospital.
Just about.
it's also, did you know all these medical terms before? And one thing that's so funny about parents, like it's like you feel like you're talking to someone who's been in the medical system for a long time.
It is. It is. It's crazy. You learn a lot. And especially when you get a diagnosis, the first thing, they tell you, don't Google it, don't Google it. Well, that's the first thing that you always do is Google and educate yourself. So, you know what to expect. Obviously, you're not hoping for the worst, you're hoping for the best, but you also want to prepare yourself and educate yourself.
Did you find a lot on gastroparesis?
Not really, especially in a pediatric patient. Not really, honestly.
Yeah, we've had another person on the podcast with gastroparesis, but she was diagnosed as a young adult and continues to have it and wasn't able to take food by mouth for a year. But yeah, so how did you end up when you did do your research? I'm just like, every time we talk about this, Serene, I'm so happy you're building Sleuth because it's like now you get to go somewhere and it's not Google, it's data driven, it's accurate, and you're not just kind of like going into the abyss. But what did you end up finding when you were looking up all of these procedures and looking up all this information?
It's overwhelming. To be honest with you, it's a lot of information. But I was able to connect with a lot of people on social media, which is great. Because it's so nice to be able to connect with someone who gets it and has gone through a similar journey. And it's honestly one of the reasons that we began sharing Scarlett's story too. We wanted to, not only help educate and raise awareness, but to help people feel like they're not alone. And we learned some of the best tips and tricks from social media, watching TikToks or watching people on Instagram. They've been through it, so they know, the tips and tricks and, what accessories to get for a feeding tube or, all the things. So it was awesome to be able to find a community of people that just gets it.
I'm interested in hearing a little bit about both of y'all's experience with feeding therapy and maybe something you wish you would have known at the beginning, kind of going into feeding therapy with your child. And I think, were they around similar ages? I guess Scarlett was a little bit younger than what you guys have gone through, Serene.
Yeah, my daughter was 4 and she's still in feeding therapy. I mean, one thing I've learned about feeding therapy, and Kelsey, I'd be so curious if this is your experience too, is that there's what I wish I knew is that different therapists have different expertise, even if they're all feeding therapists. Like my daughter's dysfunction was a swallow dysfunction. And we've only found 2 people in the New York City area who specialize that in kids. And by literally just being super fortunate, we've worked with both of them, which would have been otherwise just really hard. And so it's almost like she does strength training for her swallow muscles, whereas someone might be more of an expertise in the behavioral aspect of eating. Like if a child has a problem with textures, like my daughter doesn't have a problem with textures, she has a problem with swallow.
So we're kind of the opposite of you. She doesn't have any issues with swallowing, but she does have issues with textures. So she just started feeding therapy like within the past 2 weeks. So I can't speak to, long-term goals, but we have seen improvement. Like I said, she has a lot of issues with textures just because for a long time she was restricted to things only like purees or soft foods. So she's not really used to chewing and different kinds of textures. So that's kind of our new world right now, is learning new textures, new foods, new flavors, because she wasn't able to even try it really before.
Kelsey, does the feeding therapist come to your house or do you go to them? And the reason I'm asking is I'm curious. I know there's 2 older siblings in your house too. And how integrated are they into Scarlett's care and what she goes through?
So we go to a facility, and it's the same place that she gets physical therapy. So she gets physical therapy twice a week and feeding therapy once a week. But of course, we always bring whatever we learn there, we bring it home, and they are a huge help. They want to be a huge part of her journey. They're always cheering her on, even the smallest little milestone we celebrate in our house. So, even if it's oh, she took one bite of strawberry, we're all clapping, celebrating, cheering her on. They have the best bond, honestly. They call her Super Tubi. They're so proud to teach people about her tube. But honestly, they have a bond like no other. They truly love each other.
It is
Oh,
so cute.
I know. Well, and I'm like, how do you teach that to your older siblings? That's a question we get a lot, right? Is like, how much is too much integration and the load that siblings are carrying? But the picture you just told us about is the whole purpose.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, it's not always rainbows and butterflies. They're at hard ages, especially when she is inpatient, where there's a lot of worry and fear and missing mommy and daddy. When she was inpatient, we're 2.5 hours away. So it was hard on them,
Wow.
especially, when we're inpatient on a holiday or a birthday. It's a hard age to find a balance of, letting them know what's going on, but not telling them too much to the point that they worry. They understand way more than you realize, though, and their little minds wander. Thankfully, we have family that's close and they were able to stay with their grandparents. Shout out to Gigi and Pappy, who, of course, spoiled them to death, as they should.
I just read
But
this tweet that was like, the only real life hack is living close to grandparents.
yes, they're the best, and they love them to death. But I'll never forget, like, leaving for Scarlett surgery. We all cried, because they just worry, and it's heartbreaking. Um, there's no right way to walk the journey of, especially when you have other siblings in the mix of a medical journey, because, like I said, you want them to understand what's going on, but not understand too much. And like I said, they're at a really hard age, but we include them in a lot of things, which I think helps. So even simple things like flushing her tube, we'll be like, hey, Jackson, why don't you grab a flush? And he'll push the syringe and be a part of it and make them feel included. So it's not something that seems scary to them, which can easily happen, especially when your house is all of a sudden looking like a hospital. You come home from the hospital and now you have not only a feed pump, but you've got IV poles, you've got feed pumps going off all hours of the night. It can be scary and overwhelming for them. We even got little like baby dolls and teddy bears that have feeding tubes in them, so that they could practice, on their little doll or their teddy bear to say, hey, it's not scary, it doesn't hurt, and make them a part of it too.
Those rituals are so important. Like I remember my older daughter used to so when my younger daughter started eating, we had an eating day. Like we literally went around to different dessert places in New York City and invited our friends, and so we ate donuts and then we ate cupcakes and whatever. And I feel like there's a component of doing the celebrations like you're saying that have it's like therapy, right? Like you're acknowledging to your family that your family life might look different than other people's family life, but you can name it and you can find the joy in it too. And I think that's so important, right? It's like the bears in the picture that you showed of your sons with the Tubi tattoos.
Yes, yeah,
really
like you're
important.
saying, it's important to find, it might not be normal to other people, but you find your family's new normal. And I feel like we've done that. It takes a long journey to get to that point, but it's our normal now.
We'll be right back. Have you ever wanted to sit down with your child or one of your patients and just have a really impactful play session, but you don't have the bandwidth to go get every single piece of everything that you need, or you're in a rush and you don't want to spend that time gathering materials because it's just exhausting, honestly, sometimes to have to think about exactly what to put together. When I finally got my hands on a sensory play kit from Present Not Perfect, I was obsessed because I could just sit down with my child, not have to do any prep work, but have an impactful and meaningful play session with them. Created by a teacher and a therapist, these sensory play kits foster early emotional literacy skills through the power of playful metaphor. But honestly, my son and I, we just sat down, we had a great time of connection. we actually ended up talking about some of the issues that he was having without me having to start or provoke the conversation. It just happened really naturally. You can get 10% off your order with the code CHILDLIFE10 when you go to presentnotperfectllc.com. You can also find and shop on Instagram at present_notperfect_. Again, that's presentnotperfectllc.com with code CHILDLIFE10. When you're there, you're there. And I think about that too with you, Serene. Like when you guys were in rehab, you were in rehab. Like there's no breaks. There's no coming home every once in a while.
Yeah, I think it's like some of the hardest parts, especially when you're inpatient, is, constantly holding them down for blood draws and procedures and putting them under anesthesia. And not only do they develop medical PTSD at such a young age, but so do you. As soon as you, walk into that hospital or have another doctor's appointment, you start to get PTSD as well. And like I touched on before, getting home is hard just as much as it is being inpatient. You have all of these outpatient follow-up appointments, you have PT, insurance calls, DME calls. It's a lot to handle and keep organized. And then in addition to all that, you're learning all of this new medical stuff too. When I became a mom, I never imagined that I would have to be trained to put in something like an NG tube or a G tube into, my daughter's stomach. And people always say like, I could never, but I assure you, you would. I still remember putting in my first NG tube, teary-eyed, hand shaking, sweating, and I still get nervous. I still get overwhelmed. And I've been doing it for 2 years. It does get easier though. Like I said, having family support is really, really important.
Do you have any hacks of like caring for yourself when it gets really stressful?
I like to exercise. That sounds crazy, but I like to run. I like to get my stress out that way. I like to take a good bath. It sounds so silly, but when you're inpatient, the simple things of taking a bath or laying on the couch, you take those things for granted and then you get inpatient and you're like, oh my gosh, all I want is to just take a nice hot bath and lay in my own bed and lay on my own couch and binge watch TV,
It's hard. Like I remember in rehab, it's like, every day is so hard. And then you're like, oh, I finally found time to go take a shower. And like the shower was down the hall. It was a shared shower. And I remember one day I went in and a very hairy individual had taken a shower before me. And I'm like, no. I cannot believe I am reliving freshman year of college in like the worst ways.
And it's hard.
Exactly what I was thinking about. It's like those dorm showers. Oh,
no. Yes. And yes. And you have like such a short pocket. I know like a lot of times it was just me in the hospital with Scarlett, my husband was going back and forth. So especially with her, she's so attached to me. So if she would fall asleep, I would like run to try to go take a shower or run to try to go grab something to eat because I knew as soon as she woke up that she would be obviously screaming for me. So you're trying to find like these little pockets of time just to take care of your needs.
I have a parent hack for the showers, and that's that what they don't tell you is that the towels they give the parents are the same size towels they give the kids. And so you always have to ask for more towels because otherwise it won't cover your body. Like seriously, you'll be putting a tiny towel around yourself. So always ask for more towels.
But also, sorry, on that thing, it's like, it's not designed. I'm glad that it's designed for kids and not adults, like the inpatient experience. I wouldn't want it any other way, but it's super awkward that the bathrooms don't have locks on it.
Yeah, that's true. I never even thought about that, Serene, but you're right. Because it's like, if there's an emergency, we have to get in. It can't be locked.
Yeah.
So what do you like? Can we hang let's brainstorm here. Can we hang a sign that's like,
they're just like, may the odds,
it's like the emoji.
May the odds be ever in your favor that someone doesn't walk in on you.
Yes.
I think
Oh,
and it's so simple. I think, Katie, you're right. It could just be like a flip sign, like
yeah.
occupied, not occupied, you know?
Yeah, I know, but that's such a good thought. I just speaking about it's not small, like this fact that exercising fuels you and allows you to get rid of some of the stress that you experience on a day-to-day basis. And it's like when you can prioritize that, like even myself, I'm not a medical parent, but prioritizing that stuff makes you feel more like a human, like you belong to you again, even if it's hard. Exercise has never come easy to me, but I've always done it because it's like, okay, I'm in my body. I'm doing it for me. Like there's nobody else around. So I think it makes a lot of sense that you feel that way to kind of take care of yourself.
Absolutely.
What do you what do you think you've learned about yourself since becoming Scarlett's mom?
You know, I feel like it's been such a long, hard journey, but we have learned so much along the ride. In addition to meeting some incredible people along the way, it has truly changed our entire family's perspective on life, honestly. We no longer sweat the silly small stuff. You know, as a family, we celebrate every single milestone, no matter how small. We just look at things differently. And I know this probably sounds crazy, but it's even strengthened our marriage. You know, it's hard to be in that hospital room, especially time after time after time. And if you've been there, you know the amount of tears shed and cry so hard you can't even catch your breath. You know, that white knuckle grip of a hug you give your significant other when you feel like the world's crashing down around you and you can't even breathe. But we've really learned to lean on each other. We've learned how to divide and conquer when we need to. We've learned how to make each other laugh and do silly things to pass time while she's in surgery or getting a procedure done, or even just to get out of our funks. And we've really learned to appreciate all the little things in life, even simple things like date nights for other people. You know, they drop their kids off with a babysitter and go out to a fancy dinner. For us, that looks different. You know, our date night is waiting for the kids to go to bed and door dashing McDonald's. And as silly as that sounds, that's our normal because it's not so easy to just drop off, you know, our kids when you've got a feed pump, you've got all this medical supplies, you've got in case of an emergency medical binder that goes along with it. Um, so it's tough, but you know, it's really strengthened our marriage. The other major positive experience that we've really gained from this experience is our perspective on body image, which may sound crazy, but when we found out that Scarlett would need a surgical feeding tube, one of the thoughts that crossed our mind was how would she feel about when she got older? Whether it was a scar or she just still had her feeding tube, you know, would she be self conscious about it? Would kids make fun of her? But it wasn't really until after that our whole perspective changed. You know, we knew that we would raise her to be confident and be proud of her to be and show her that every day that every single body is unique and beautiful despite, you know, scars, color, age, weight, literally whatever, and that she doesn't need to change a thing. But it even changed the way that I looked at my own body, you know, makes you dig deep and realize what's important in life. And I want to be a role model to her and teach her to be proud of her body just the way it is. And I feel like it's really important for her to feel like she doesn't have to hide it. You know, we've had our fair share of, you know, ew, what's that? Talking about our feeding tube, you know, like on the playground. And I'm not naive, you know, I know the day will come when she comes home from school crying or something because somebody made fun of her. And that happens in every day, even if, you know, don't have a disability or something that's making you different. But our goal is just to try to teach her to make it a positive experience and a learning experience. Um, so it really made us start looking at things differently. And the other thing that really opened our eyes was when she had to have a gait trainer in order to get around. The lack of accessibility in even our local area is crazy. And it's kind of one of those things that you don't realize the importance of accessibility until you're the one needing it. So when she needed a gait trainer in order to just, you know, walk around and play with other kids, it was eye-opening. It really was.
I think that's so beautiful, the way that you think about it and how it relates to you and that relationship between her body and the way you perceive it. I think that's so deep. I mean, one of the phrases we say to the kids is like different bodies do different things, and it reminded me of like when you said that. Do you find it liberating at all, this new perspective that you have from your journey?
100%. I look at life differently. I look at my body differently. I feel like I'm a completely different person now than I was before we started this journey in such a good way. I used to, you know, self-doubt, and obviously everyone has things that they're self-conscious about naturally. But I want to be able to show her like, hey, look, I have flaws and I have things that are different too, and I'm proud of them. And if I'm talking negatively to myself, how can I teach her to talk positively to herself? I feel like we have to be a model to show them, hey, everyone's different. Everyone has something that makes them unique and it's beautiful. I think like this crazy, beauty standard is silly.
Yeah.
So we just want to teach her that everybody is unique and everybody is different and you're beautiful for it, and to love herself just the way she is.
I have to agree. Like that part made me tear up a little bit because it's like we're able to see you on Zoom and I can see the way that you're speaking about yourself. And it's true, when we have our kids, there are no flaws in them. So how can we believe that there's flaws in ourselves too? And that it
Right.
becomes such a part of our everyday life. It seems crazy from the outside looking in when we look at our kids and see how perfectly imperfect we all are. So thank you for sharing that.
I have a
Yes.
follow-up question that comes from experience. And I'm so curious because I struggle with this a lot. In your like kind of journey towards feeling liberated about your perspective of life, how do you deal with maybe people in your life, whether close or not, or the parenting culture around you that might not have that like opening of a perspective, right? Like I feel like there's just a lot of like, oh, my kid goes to all these extracurricular activities, or like I put pressure on my kid to perform this way. And I'm like, I literally can't do that because most of Saturdays we're going to therapy. How do you continue to engage in a world and with people who might have different perspectives on like children's journeys?
I think it's hard. We even have had like even adults come up and say things that I'm like, would you say that to your own daughter? That are like, what is that? Like talking about her feeding tube. And it takes you back. And I try in those situations, as much as my mama bear wants to come out and say some choice words, I try, especially in front of her and in front of my boys, try to make it an educational and a learning experience of, oh, hey, actually, it's her feeding tube and this is what it does and this is why she has it. And it's really cool, say things like, she can even eat while she's sleeping, and try to make it a positive experience. But I also, like I said, am not naive. There's some people that you just can't change their minds. You can't change what other people do. You can't change what other people say. You can't change what other people think, but you can change the way you react to it. And I think that's important, that you have to be able to change your mindset of what are you going to let affect you? What are you going to let make you upset? And that's when I touched a little bit on earlier, is you have to dig deep and figure out the important things in life. And somebody making a comment and somebody living differently than you in the big scheme of things doesn't matter. So I think it's kind of those things that you have to like pick and choose your battles. You figure out what your family's normal is and you stick to it. You have to do what makes your family happy and what works for your family. And it's not going to look like somebody else's family's schedule does. And like you said, we have a lot of balance. Like you said, while some people are, on Saturdays doing this and this, we are in the same boat of, she's in therapy 3 times a week, but both my boys also play soccer and baseball. So it's a balancing act of doing all of the things, and it's hard. It is.
Yeah. That's such a good perspective of like, you get to be in charge. Like, I hear you guys talk and I'm just like, I feel so sad for the people that don't know you and don't know your story and walk up. I just have this, I don't know. It makes me crazy that even adults are still sometimes so tone deaf to
Yeah.
what is appropriate and what is approachable. But I think both of you coming out and always speaking so honestly and authentically about what you go through does spread that awareness and does make a dent in how the rest of the world will perceive people who have different abilities. Kelsey, thank you so much for giving us your time today, let alone like a quiet hour away,
I
which I know is
know.
hard to get.
It
But
is.
if you like to share on social media, don't feel obligated to do it. And
Yes.
I've started this new caveat too, is that if somebody DMs you, it is not your responsibility to DM them back. Okay. You put out there what you want. Those are your boundaries. But I was just talking with another mom yesterday, and she's like, sometimes the weight of these people DMing me with very similar complex situations, I feel bad if I don't respond. Right. But that's
Yeah.
not on her or you, Serene,
Right.
or me for that matter. Right. It's like we put out there what we can with our boundaries. Sometimes we respond and sometimes we can't.
Yeah. And like you said, it's important to have that boundary of, yes, we want to share, we want to raise awareness, we want to, have people follow along and cheer on, but there is still that boundary of, we have our private life as well and share what we want.
Absolutely. Well, with that said, where can people follow along with you and just see the beautiful smiles of your beautiful family?
Yes, so you can follow our family on Instagram. I give it to you. It's Kelsey and then 3_ Ward, WARD. And they can also follow Scarlett's Journey on TikTok as well.
Oh, great. Well, thank you so much for your time. And it's just been so wonderful to get to meet you and coming out about gastroparesis and pediatrics. I imagine this would be really interesting for a lot of physicians to listen to as well.
Yes.
Just to hear what you go through. So
yes. Well, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us on the Child Life On Call podcast. The only reason this podcast keeps on going is because of you and listeners like you. So please join in on the conversation with us on Instagram, Facebook. I'm even on TikTok now, y'all, making a fool of myself. I haven't danced yet, but maybe it's coming. You can find us at Child Life On Call. We also have a website, and that has all of our information about the Child Life Circle, about the Child Life On Call app, and a blog with new information all the time. That's childlifeoncall.com. Thank you again from the bottom of my heart for listening to these episodes and being a part of this community. We are so grateful and so honored to be able to provide this for you.